ladies and gentlemen. I'm Colonel Kathy Turner, the Chief of Media Relations Division for Army Public Affairs. We've got the Honorable Ryan McCarthy, Secretary of the Army, and General James McConville, the Chief of Staff of the Army. Secretary McCarthy and General McConville will begin today's press conference with brief opening remarks. We'll then open it up for questions. Please wait for me to call on you. Let's try to keep it to one follow-up so we can get as many questions as possible in the time allotted. Also, when asking your question, I ask that you please identify yourself and your news organization. Mr. Secretary, over to you.
Well, I've been talking all morning, so I thought I'd let the Chief kick us off here.
Well, thank you, Mr. Secretary. And I think many of you have heard the Secretary's comments this morning. And the one thing I'd just like to put in context is this notion of modernization, and where we are as far as modernizing the Army. If you go back to the 1970s and 1980s, that was the last time we did a major modernization of the Army. We're coming out of the Vietnam War, and we realized that we were in a time of great power competition with the Soviet Union, and that's when we came up with a new doctrine. We called it earlier in battle. We came up with some new units, Ranger battalions, the 160th, and some other special organizations that allowed us to operate in that environment. We developed our combat training centers where we taught our troops how to fight in a high intensity environment, and our Joint Readiness Training Center. We came up with our big 5 systems, which were the Abrams tank, the Bradley, the Apache helicopter, the Black Hawk, and the Patriot missile system. And then as far as personnel, we came up with the all-volunteer force. That fundamentally kind of set the stage for the Army that we have been incrementally improving over the last about 45 years. So you say, well, where are we today? Well, today we find ourselves at a time of great power competition. Great power competition does not necessarily mean great power conflict, but we are modernizing the Army to do that. So we are coming up with a new concept called multi-domain operations. Very similar to airline battle, except it sets us up for an environment where we can test it in every single environment. We're standing up new organizations. We stood up new organizations in the 70s, 80s, and today we're standing up organizations, the Multi-Domain Task Force, which we're reorganizing our cyber command so we can operate within the intelligence, information, cyber, electronic warfare, and space regimes. We've stood up security force assistance brigades that allow us to compete below the level of armed conflict and advise and assist our partners. And then as far as the training environment, we're actually going into virtual reality. So we're doing a lot of programs that are associated with virtual reality. We're standing up a set of training environments that allow our soldiers to train in that environment. We're setting up cyber combat training centers so we can train there. Our 6 modernization priorities, the Secretary talked about them with 31 signature platforms. Those are not changing. You've got new leadership here, but we are committed to actually delivering those over the next years. And the last thing on the people side of the house, if you heard me talk, people are our #1 priority. We're still, as far as how we get to readiness, how we get to modernization, and how we get to reform, it's people that are going to do that, and we are standing up a 21st century talent management system. We cannot be an industrial age Army in the information age. So, Secretary.
Okay, so we'll start the questions.
I will lead about with the Associated Press. Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Secretary, as this is a serious question, it's shocking. As the U.S. is looking to at least pull some forces out, has the Army been asked to develop either bring in more troops or develop a way to pull out most of the other forces there safely? And how long do you think something that, like, could the Army do something like that? And General McConville, as you look at what's happening over the last several days, when you think of the safety of the U.S. forces, particularly the Special Operations Forces that are actually there, how much more risk are they facing right now? And does this have an impact on Special Operations Forces who are in other countries partnering with forces that now may not trust them as much?
Lita, to address your first question, we adjusted the troop disposition in northeast Syria, and very complex, obviously, situation between two allies that we have been partnered with for many years. I'm not going to comment specifically on follow-on activities at this point. It's a very fluid situation. But clearly this is something that will continue to unfold over the coming days.
The other thing I can add to that, though, the safety and security of our soldiers, the American soldiers in our partners there, is a key consideration in every decision that's being made.
And what about what impact this has on others in other countries?
Well, again, we are working very closely with our partners to make sure that the safety and security of their soldiers and our soldiers is the top priority.
Hi, Tom Vandenbroek with USA Today. My colleagues and I have spoken to soldiers over the past several days who say that the decision to withdraw has been a profound betrayal of the Kurds. How do you explain to soldiers that that's not so? Either one.
You have to take the time to explain to your soldiers about the complexity of the situation. That we have had partners, we're partnered with both nations that have had both of these partners, the Kurds and the Turks, conducting complex combat operations. You have to explain to them that they obviously the equities between of how we conduct operations against ISIS are very much aligned, but with the challenges that they've had historically between the Kurds and the Turks, that's an issue that's been going on for years. So when the partners have different equities, you have to take the time to explain the differences between soldiers and the choices that we have to make at the national level.
Just one follow-up. How does this decision to withdraw improve America's national security interests?
We're trying to make sure we don't have a challenge with a NATO ally. So there's a lot of work that has to be done between us and the Turkish counterparts. Secretary Esper and General Miller working very hard at their level with partners to continue to communicate and try to create that buffer zone to try to prevent hostilities.
To ask about something you probably actually are allowed to talk about, Cindy, for breaking defense. Listening to your speech this morning, I heard it, obviously a lot of familiar themes, but also some themes that you stressed, I think, more than in the past, like rapid deployment to Europe, like information warfare. Obviously, you guys have been on the team for a long time, for years now. There's a lot of continuity, but if you don't learn new stuff, you're probably dead. So what are the changes in emphasis that we're seeing within the context of the consistent Big Six and consistent shift to great power competition, like deployability, like information warfare, for example?
I'll go first. I think the chief should definitely comment here too. If you look at home station training and CTCs, that's, to use a sports metaphor, it's like individual reps where you're hitting a sled and you're playing catch. But then to get to a point where you're deploying at brigade, division-size elements under wartime-like conditions, that's where you're really getting those preseason games. You're really getting ready to do the business of combat operations. So it takes a lot more effort, a lot more sophistication to have that global projection. And those are, the way I described it, muscles that we hadn't been training on for a long time. But over the last several years, we've been really hitting hard with that and doing it, with real-life conditions where emergency deployment readiness exercises, you're moving out within a couple days for heavy units, and doing it all over the world under conditions that we have not had in many, many years, of sending units to places like Palau in Thailand, where we had not had the robust training exercises that we've had for many, many years.
I think over the last two or 3 years, General Milley, my predecessor, did a fantastic job of taking our units and getting them ready for whatever mission that they would able to be doing. And I would term that tactical readiness, the brigades, the battalions, they can do their mission and they're ready to do them. And on line with what the Secretary was saying is, we're looking at strategic readiness. It's one thing to have a unit ready. The second piece of that is making sure you get that unit to the place it needs to be. We use the term from the National Defense Strategy of
dynamic force employment, and so we want to be able to do that. We want to make sure that we can mobilize them, we can deploy them, we have the strategic lift to make that happen. The ports are there to receive them, and then we can employ them in whatever area they need to be employed, and we see that as a deterrence factor for those who may be taking a look at what capabilities the United States Army has. And as the Secretary said, we anticipate a very large exercise in the Yukon Theater. We'll call it Defender 20, and then we'll follow up with a small exercise in the Pacific, and then maybe a larger exercise next year.
Hi, Matt Boehner, Defense Daily. You both mentioned the priority to sticking to the 6 priorities. I was wondering if, do you believe that there's the flexibility built in to be able to handle adjustments that might come from the effects of a CR, potential declining budgets, adjustments to competition, like potentially with OMFE, that moving forward in terms of there potentially being one competitor? Is that level of flexibility built in for the 30 or so programs under the 6 priorities?
Continued resolutions, there's no flexibility. You lose buying power immediately. We could lose potentially upwards of $7 billion worth of buying power for our research development acquisition accounts. Just that alone, because of continuing resolutions. From a readiness standpoint, commanders can't buy parts. They reduce training events. The whole machine starts to slow down. So if there is one out there, I don't know what it is. So we have to get a budget deal. It's on the table. We need to work hard with Congress to get this done, which will give us 4 years in a row of disciplined, focused investment. We had prototypes landing all over those 6 portfolios, and they're showing results. And so that would be an exciting time for us to make some hard decisions and start to scale them across the formations. We got to get a budget deal through.
Yeah, we have to modernize the Army, and we can't do it without the resources. If the resources come slow, it's going to just slow us down, and we need to field this equipment at the speed of relevance.
Thank you, Ryan Brown with CNN. Just to follow up on one of the earlier questions, it is unusual to hear U.S. service members, particularly soft personnel, speak so openly with the media about how they're feeling. Feelings of betrayal, feelings of disappointment, damage to future partnerships. Are you worried about the impact that this is having on morale of U.S. personnel, given this unprecedented level of open conversation about this issue?
I think to say that that's new is probably, I don't think that, I wouldn't characterize that personally. I think more and more soldiers are very candid about how they feel. And, I like candor. It's important to have that. You obviously don't want to have disobedience, but it's definitely, they have to have opinions. Everybody has opinions, there's a war of ideas, but ultimately, when national policy decisions are made, we salute them out.
Yeah, I'm very proud of what our special forces and soldiers are working shoulder to shoulder. And they've done an incredible mission over there, and we should be extremely proud of what they've done. And there are higher level strategic politics involved. As far as what our soldiers have done, what our special forces have done, they've done an incredible job over there, and I'll be very, very proud. Thank you.
Hello, Justice Bennett with Defense Systems Journal. I'm sort of wondering about what the backup plan might be, or what happens if that funding isn't there in future years. Is it going to be a more intensive sort of night course look at prioritizing things? Is it maybe putting certain prioritization on the back burner? What does that look like?
We will have nothing but hard choices in front of us. When 60% of global demand is filled by the U.S. Army, readiness has to be number one. We have to continue to grow the force. Because as the chief will tell you, the bogged well ratio's got to get better. And so from a readiness standpoint, you're very fixed with your balance sheet. Over half of it is tied up in people, operations, and maintenance. So when you hear us use words like ruthless and aggressive, we have to be within the research, development, and acquisition accounts, because you're very fixed with what you have. And every investment program has divestiture. So we're going to make hard calls on weapons systems that mature enough, fast enough, and that we can go through that modernization novel. So I see more of that coming in the future.
I mean, if you take a look at the reason I'm back to the 70s and 80s, is there was some senior leadership with the support of Congress and the administration that made some very important decisions. And because of that, we are a modernized force today. But if you go back, you start doing the math, that's like 40 to 50 years ago. And we've incrementally improved our Army over the last 40, 45 years. We feel strongly that we must do the same for those who come after us. I don't want troops or leaders sitting up here to your folks that your successes 40, 45 years from now, and we're on the Z model Abrams, or we're in we have not modernized the Army. We have a unique opportunity to do it right now. We've had 2 good years of budgets. We need 2 more, and I would ask that those who make those type of decisions recognize the importance of this and make it happen.
Hey, Joseph LaFay of National Guard magazine. Speaking of readiness and exercises like Defender 20 and Defender Pacific, can you talk about what role the National Guard is going to have in these larger exercises, and maybe what a battalion or a company commander in the Guard can expect in the next few years as far as op tempo goes?
Yeah, I think 2 things. First of all, the National Guard is extremely important part of everything we do. So as I talk about dynamic force employment, the term I used first was mobilization. And you know exactly what that means. But our National Guard is in our reserves are more than 53% of the force when you think about it. So if we go somewhere, we're not going without the National Guard, we're not going out with reserves. So we have to practice that piece too, about mobilizing them, deploying them. And we anticipate on these exercises, the unit that's involved in the rotation will actually do that. They'll get a chance to get mobilized, they'll deploy, they'll participate in the exercise, and then they'll come back. And then the second thing on op tempo, we are concerned about the op tempo on some of our Guard reserve units. And I'm working with the director of the Army National Guard to see where we can find opportunities to reduce that op tempo. They've been going about 1 to 4. We think 1 to 5. I'm not going to promise them 1 to 5, but that's what we think is the sweet spot for deployments for the National Guard.
Jack Nash from El Monitor. Secretary McCarthy, with the changes to the troop disposition on the ground in northern Syria, can you tell us have the force protection conditions changed, and does the U.S. Army that's still there have secure lines of exfiltration and resupply?
Yeah, I'll take that. Again, I'm not going to get into specific how we're actually conducting those type of operations, but what I will tell you, having talked to the chairman and been involved in meetings, is that the security and safety of our troops on the ground is the priority as this operation continues.
Have conditions changed at all?
Have conditions changed?
Yeah.
So that's what we're watching, we're reacting. What the force is doing on the ground, and they're very, very capable forces, is they are reacting to the changing situation on the ground.
Up and back.
Morning, Ken Kraetzer, Sons of American Legion Radio. There was several billion taken out of the federal budget for military bases improvements. West Point had 4 projects that were put on deferment. How long does it take for those projects to come back into the budget so that they can be started up, do you think?
Are you referring specifically to the National Emergency Finance Security Initiatives on the border?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Can come back in a variety of mechanisms. There was discussion about potentially backfilling them with an amendment to the 2021 deal. I don't know where that stands. We could also look at that in the FY21 budget and 22 budget, but they're all very important projects. They've been deferred, and we're going to look at a variety of different ways to refill those.
Hi, Lauren Williams with Federal Computer Week. You mentioned $700 million in investment in cloud, data, AI. What's the contingency plan should the money not come through? Also, should JEDI get delayed?
That strikes to the heart of our concern about not getting a budget deal. That those are New Start dollars. to address this extremely important architecture that we have to lay in so that we can move our data from weapon systems to make faster decisions on the battlefield, as well as making much more informed decisions from a business standpoint in places like the Pentagon. Without a budget, it's a New Start program, so it will sit and we'll wait.
Okay, any other questions? Okay. Lena? I might regret saying Lena, but
Actually, I just wanted to ask a recruiting question. This last year, you made the recruiting numbers, but by a small amount. Can you just give us a sense of what you're doing now to beef up the recruiting and anything new on marketing and bonuses? Do you have any money in the budget to do any of that, particularly considering the budget issues?
I think we should both comment. First, really salute Major General Frank Booth and Sergeant Major Tabitha Covey, the leadership of Army Recruiting Command, to perform and hit target in the active force. In this economy with 3.6% unemployment, we don't have a benchmark like this since 1969 when it was an all-draftee force. So remarkable performance by them. When you talk about specifically the challenges we face, we readdressed our strategy to focus on 22 cities in the country. Obviously, we have a much more comprehensive and diverse group in our cohorts each year of men and women from all over the country, all ethnicities. But also, we needed larger sample sizes, quite frankly. We needed more people to have the target market. But with that, you need much stronger and more sophisticated marketing capabilities. We've hired a new advertising firm. We reorganized the marketing organization. But some of that is we have to rebuild the trust with the committees of jurisdiction in Congress, who withheld some of those marketing dollars from us in the last cycle. We're working very hard at that, have much better management processes in place and investments that we've made around the country. All the Army senior leaders in the Marshall Corridor, they were all over the country meeting with mayors and superintendents of schools to try to get civic leaders at the local level to help become enablers for us on the ground. So it was a lot of much more leadership, if you will, but also changing their entire business model. And it really was that leadership of people like Frank Booth and others, their energy, tireless energy, that's improved our posture. But it's going to be harder. The economy is still going well, and we're in a fight for talent around the country. Chief?
I just kind of follow up with, we are in a competition for talent, but when we take a look at the Army, we look at why would people want to join the Army, and what young people want is they want purpose, they want to be part of something bigger than themselves, and I think we offer that. They want belonging, they want to be on a team, and I think we provide that, and their parents want them a pathway to success. And what we're finding is, in a lot of ways, we've been too much of a family business. I have 3 kids to serve, and I appreciate the Army sending them to college and doing all those wonderful things, and I'd like to give everyone else the opportunity for us to give them a pathway to success. But summer is exposure. And as the Secretary said, the 22 cities, that's where a lot of young Americans live, and we've got to expose them to the Army and the military, and make sure they have a sense of what that all means. We live in gated communities now, where with the security factors, a lot of young men and women don't get a chance to see what the Army does. 79% of our recruits come from military families, and some people say that's good, but what we'd really like to do is give every American an opportunity to serve their country and a pathway to success.
Healy Ritzky with Task and Purpose. So with the ACFT sort of being fielded more and more, some of the preliminary scores that were leaked, I'm sure you both saw, the few battalions would started testing it, which spurred a lot of concern, specifically with the fail rate that women were seeing on that preliminary scores. What is your message to people who are worried that the ACFT is going to kind of start pushing women out into service?
Yeah, we touch, some of you may be familiar with the occupational physical assessment test. Have you heard about that? Okay, that is the test that we actually give to soldiers when they come into a recruiting station to make sure that they're fit before they go to individual military training. When we first did that, we did the same thing. We put it out there and we tested soldiers who were actually in the Army. They'd already made it in the Army, and the results were abysmal. They were terrible. We were really, quite frankly, behind the scenes, we were concerned because we had this dilemma. We want people to be able to succeed in the military, and if we get them in shape before they go to initial military training, we knew we'd reduce injuries and we had better recruits. What we found was, once we made a requirement, the results completely changed. It was, a female soldier, 97% passed that, 98 to 99% passed that test. So what we're doing for the Army Combat Fitness Test is we're putting, first of all, we're getting equipment into the units. It's going to take some time. We're putting strength coaches, dietitians, physical therapists, and giving the units all the tools they need to get people into shape, so they don't have to do it. And we're seeing, and I talk to a lot of my female soldiers, and in fact, I have a female captain and kind of my daughter, and they're actually doing those repetitions, and we think it's a much better test that's going to facilitate them being better soldiers. So we got some time. We just started. This is the first year really diagnostic that units have it, but we believe it's going to fundamentally change the culture in the United States Army, a culture of deployability and fitness that we want to have. So we want people to live a healthy, active lifestyle, and this is going to help them do it. I would argue that we're the world's greatest health club. We pay people 5 days a week to work out, and we want to give them that opportunity to do that. And this is good. This is good training, and the young people that are coming in, they're all in CrossFit and functional fitness. So for them, this is very, very novel. Some of the older of us, I've been through about 3 different physical fitness tests, and I think this is really going to help the force.
Okay, so we have time for one more question. With that.
Hi, Jared Sabu from Federal News Network. So 2 cyber questions. One is, you alluded to this, General McConville, have you signed off on General Fogarty's proposal to create an information warfare command out of our cyber? And then you also mentioned the cyber CTCs. Are those for cyber forces specifically, or larger formations? What's going to happen?
We're looking very hard at that proposal. I think it makes a lot of sense, because if you see the way the other services are organized in particular, they have the unique task organization similar to what he's proposed. But some of it is we just got to put a lot of rigor and due diligence against it, because it would ultimately change the authorities of his command. So that's something we're going to tee up here and take a hard look at this fall.
Yeah, the cyber, on the cyber side, it's really recognizing how we're operating below the level of armed conflict that's happening right now around the world. And so we recognize the importance of cyber, certainly. We recognize the importance of information operations. We recognize the importance of electronic warfare, and then even space. And so we are developing organizations. We don't have it completely right yet, but we're not waiting to get them right. We're waiting to get them out in the field. We're experimenting. We're doing simulation. We've seen people, question us, well, you don't have all the people right. We're not going to have it all right. These are prototypes. Just like we do with equipment, some of these organizations are getting prototype, some are bringing it in, and we're not waiting to get it perfectly right and all the pencils lined up exactly right before we're rolling them out. Because we know we've got to be there. This has happened very, very quick. And we're doing the same thing on these cyber and eventually we call it I2Qs organizations that we're developing.
All right, Mr. Secretary Chief, I turn over to you for any closing comments.
I hope you get down to the floor this week. It's more than just iron that you're going to see. It's really amazing how much the points that General McConville made in his opening comments of just how we're changing our doctrine, how we're going to basically, our people, we're going to change who they are and how they conduct themselves in the fight. So you can learn a lot about these massive changes, because it is more than just buying material. It's how all these pieces come together. I am going to get to walk the floor 3 times this week. I'm pretty excited about that. Free from this is what I say earlier today, the shackles of PowerPoint slides. So this is a pretty exciting week for me. And I think we'll get to see a lot of you down on the floor as well. I know that General Hannah's made some arrangements so that the media can have cutouts down on the floor.